All right, welcome to the second track of the original game soundtrack for Elder Scrolls Online. We're going to be reviewing that. This is The Moons of Evening Star, which is composed by Derrick. And you can hear this in Bleak Rock Isle, East March, The Rift, and Solitude. So very much an Ebonheart-packed song. And for those who don't know, the Evening Star is the 12th month of the calendar year in the Elder Scrolls. So this is a very, equivalent of December, winter kind of thing. And obviously the moons of that month, so we're going for that kind of like ethereal feel to it, especially because those who know, we have two moons in the Elder Scrolls world. So it's not just Moon of Evening Star, it's Moons of Evening Star. And we're going to really hear that kind of like ethereal sound in this song. So let's jump into it. All right, so this is a really great intro, and I want to explain what we see here. So we start off with those woodwinds, right? And they kind of give it that very wispy sound, and then what they do is to really bring something in to focus on, they bring that deep string sound, right? And so you can hear that going, and as that starts, we start to hear the kind of like the pickup of the higher strings, and we hear those start to go. And underneath that, while that's happening, this is really cool. Those higher voices come in, and you don't actually hear them come in at first. You start to hear them as the high strings start to fade. The higher voices start to rise, right? So they pick up even more and more, and so you kind of have this balance where the strings are coming off and the voices are coming up. And that's where you kind of hear, like, there's a point where they're actually very similar, and you're like starting to hear it there. And then it switches. And that's a really, really cool hook for that reason. I really like that. I like that. Start with the deep strings, and then we use those two high voices to kind of do this really cool little switch. And let's keep going and listening then. All right, and so then you can hear those voices and those strings start to complement each other and working together, and you've still got that deeper string going, and then we kind of have everything fall off together, and it just comes down. So kind of denoting that, hey, we've finished up this little hook intro using the deep strings and then the high strings and the high voices. And we've got the woodwinds giving that like the kind of the way I kind of describe it is that wispy sound is what they're giving in the background. And right after that hook, right, then the next thing we jump into is we've got the harp, right? And the harp is really associated with that kind of etherealness. So really cool use of that to kind of reflect. Here's the etherealness of the moons, and we're going to use the harp to reflect that. And that's going to be the big driving force in this part. And I want to jump in right here, right before the voice gets too far. So we've got the harp, and then you can hear that underneath all of that. If you're really listening, you'll start to hear that woodwind, and then you kind of hear that. And I'm guessing it's like a principal flute. Is my guess. It's not a piccolo. Is starting to bring that woodwind, that higher pitched flute woodwind voice up, and then that's what the vocalist comes in on, right? So they kind of build it up with the flute so the vocalist can come in, and it's not jarring that you have this higher pitched voice just kind of coming in. So we did this slow build up so that it comes in and it just feels really natural that voice just slides in right on top of that and can then go in, and you don't even feel like it just like, oh, where'd that voice come from? It was there with that woodwind. So very, very cool. I really like that. Right, and when the voice falls off, that they bring in those mid-range strings to the mid-range and some of the deeper strings to bring in that same kind of beat, so that we don't lose it. The voice kind of gave us that beat that it was using, and then the strings kind of pick it up so that we don't lose that as we continue on. So we've kind of just transferred from the voice, that high voice, to the mid-range and lower strings. All right, and now we've got that piano, right? And it's that dun, 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 dun. But if you listen to it, right, every time it's that same note, and they're going to keep doing that several times, and they're going to be changing the note. But they're letting each instance of where they're striking with the hammer on the piano, it's softening. So we're starting up at the top, softening, softening, softening. Now we're going to start at the top, soften. Soften, soften. Then start at the top and soften, and they're using that to really drive that it's like that you have that moment and it's backing off. So again, it's these little tiny things, like you could just have the piano, right, play that same note each time, and if they did it at the same level of loudness, right, it just wouldn't hit the same, right? We're trying to bring in that ethereal feel to it, and part of that is that wispiness and falling off, right? And that's what we're bringing in here. All right, and now that we've heard that piano part, right, and we kind of like slowed it down. Now, when we're doing the build up, it's the other part to it. It's going the opposite way, right? The piano starts loud and goes down, but it's keeping that same beat. The rest of the build up is moving up with how loud it is, and so you've got these two contrasting things. So you're starting off, and then you're kind of meeting. And then they're going away again. Really great amount of give and play between these kinds of instruments. Because again, like if you have your instruments that are very much at the same level of volume the entire time, if you're not changing from pianissimo to forte, fortissimo, it's very bland, right? It's like someone's talking like this. There's no real volume change. And people don't talk like that unless you're watching Ferris Bueller's Day Off and you've got Bueller, right? And that's not interesting. Whereas the amount of volume play is really great in a lot of these tracks, and I really like that. They're not afraid to say we're gonna be moving these volumes all the time. Almost every couple bars, these volumes are changing, which is just fantastic for the way that the instruments are allowed to play off of each other. So And the other thing I want to mention with this is the amount of instruments and like the restraint on how much to use them is really, really cool. You get that cymbal, right? We've only heard it a couple times, but that cymbal roll really adds that depth. And it's not a really loud cymbal roll, it's a really light cymbal roll. And then again, we've also got the that percussion instrument. I don't want to say that it's a glockenspiel. It's not, but it's some kind of one of those like a metal like glockenspiels. I don't know which one it is exactly off the top of my head, but by adding that in, right, you get that again, a different sound layered on top of all this other stuff. And then we're bringing in the strings again and all of that. And we've backed off on a lot of the woodwinds. You don't hear them as prevalent. We've only barely used the voice, which is really cool. We're not overdoing it. All of these things are really interesting in what they're combining to make a pretty cool piece of music, in my opinion, in the depth of it. So. Okay, that's really cool there too. I know I'm saying that a lot, but what I like there is they took some of the melodies that the other instruments were playing and have transferred them to different instruments, right? So as the voice came in, we've changed it, we added it, again, we heard that cymbal roll, and they used a different cymbal roll like that time, and then they went back to the other one. But now, instead of that percussion, right, that we're hearing, we hear the horn playing that instead. And instead of it being the various strikes, right, so it's very distinct which notes being hit, you've got that kind of like chained in part sound from the horn. So it's kind of like almost like slurring it all together, which is really nice. Very contrasting on how you can take the same melody, change it just by giving it to a different instrument. And then you're going to have a completely different sound that can support now that voice as we get into it. All right, again, you hear that same kind of like melody that we've been hearing has again the percussion. We've had it on the horn, and now it's in the higher strings. So again, we're just kind of constantly changing who has that melody and who's playing it, which is really just a fantastic way of reusing the same thing, but now it sounds completely different, and you're able to layer it with other instruments and other sounds, and it changes how it is, while still capturing that kind of ethereal feel to it. The horns, right? It's like kind of slurred. And with bows, it's one big motion. So you get those sounds that are very similar, but completely different. I really like that. All right, and now we're getting to the point, kind of like the climax of the song, right? This is kind of where it's at. We're going to combine the voice. We're going to combine those stringed instruments. We're probably going to hear, and I'm just guessing, at some point that cymbal roll. But we're going to start throwing all that we've been doing and putting it together. It'll be interesting to see if they added the harp or not. We'll find out. All right, and so that's the end of the song, and we kind of went out the same way we came in, right? We transitioned from the voice to the strings, and then to the etherealness of those woodwinds. We didn't have the only thing we didn't have from the beginning, which is kind of good because you don't want that big hook again, is that lower bass woodwind, right? And without that, it's just kind of able to fall off. If you have that deeper sound, it wouldn't do that as well. It'd be kind of hooking you in like, oh, there's going to be more because there's this big sound still. Whereas here we have these high ethereal voices, calming down, winding down, lowering, ending, right? So again, this was Moons of the Evening Star. I think they really did a good job of kind of translating that etherealness that you might expect from the moons of December, right? The equivalent of December here, with Moons of the Evening Star, to song form. And like I said, if you're going to hear these in the Ebonheart pack zones, so you're going to have to go there if you want to hear it in game. But other than that, I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time, my guys, gals, my non-binary pals.